And welcome back to Local Decision 2024. I'm Eric Nelson. Thanks so much for tuning us in. And joining us now in the North Metro TV studios is Erin Koegel, DFL Minnesota House District 39A. That represents Spring Lake Park, Fridley, Columbia Heights, and Hilltop. Erin, thanks so much for stopping by. So you're running again. Tell our viewers why.
Well, I think just the community, that's why. And through this job, being able to grow into the, grow with our community members and hear their feedback and starting to see some of the fruits of our labor. And so there's just so many really cool opportunities coming up with like sustainable fuels and transit. And I've been really focused on transportation since I've been in the legislature because I know it impacts my district immensely, and so really want to make sure that we're getting it right for folks in our community. So,
how would you like to see transportation improved in this area of the North Metro?
Well, one thing that I would like to see is transit be something that is easy, gets you to point A to point B quickly. I always give the example of like if you want to go from my house by Northtown down to over to the Brooklyn Park campus, Target campus. You have to go all the way down to Minneapolis and back up. And so I'd like to really set some goals for Metro Transit as far as travel time, and making sure that when we're thinking about transit, that we're making it so that the travel time isn't 4 or 5 times longer than your commute in a car, but maybe just like double the time of your commute in a car. And so, really trying to figure out how we hit some of those timing issues. And then, of course, traffic safety is always a big one in my area. I live right on University and 85th, and so, I see those accidents happen often, and I don't like it. And so I want to make sure that we can get that corridor safe for people who with the transit station there, we want to make sure that they can walk across a road or get to that last mile. And so those are kind of some of the goals that I have for this upcoming session.
The 2024 session at the state capitol in St. Paul, from the DFL perspective, I guess you'd say was almost epic. You had the trifecta, you got a lot accomplished and passed. Tell us about that. And for you, was that the ultimate as far as political victories go?
I don't think it was an ultimate political victory because it's what the people of Minnesota have been asking for. We have had the House for 4 years previously, and so we had been really sitting on these ideas and vetting them. And so, it's a win for the people of Minnesota. I think about, the family in Fridley with 3 kids in public schools, and it saves them $1,300 for school lunches. Those are direct dollars that are in families' pockets now that they can then use at the grocery store to feed their teenage children, or for after-school activities, or maybe rent just to get by. And so these are things that have impacts in people's lives, and so that's the win.
And the free lunches, I know that's gotten national attention. Is that now a model maybe around the U.S.?
I believe it absolutely should be. I think sometimes the most nutritional meal my kiddo gets is the one at lunch. Frozen pizza often ends up on our table, and so I value that at school, and I think it could, it's going to have huge impacts not only on bellies but brains, and so I'm really excited about that program.
So Minnesota is one of 10 states that taxes Social Security. Do you want to change that?
So I always tell this analogy, and I don't know if my dad will be upset, but a few years back, it was around Christmas time, and I went up to visit him in his house on the North Shore, and we're, sitting in his sauna, and he's giving me a hard time about Social Security tax. And I'm like, Dad, we're sitting in your beautiful sauna on your $500,000 home on the North Shore. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, this place is worth more than $500,000. So that's where I have a little bit of angst when it comes to, I believe that there are that there are people who need that money, but then there are people who are not. And so I think when you look at the Social Security taxation, you know, a vast majority of Minnesotans are not being taxed on their Social Security income. And so I want to make sure that the people who are not getting taxed on it need it.
So you would differentiate who gets taxed and who
Well, I
isn't
just think it
taxed.
should be, you know, based on income.
Fair.
Yeah, you know, and that people who are making less shouldn't pay as much. And so that's just kind of what it comes down to. And so I think my dad deserves to pay Social Security taxes.
We'll see if he's tuning in.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Okay, earlier in September, really day one of school down in suburban Atlanta, you had a mass shooting in Georgia. I know Minnesota passed some new gun laws in the last session, but does more need to be done? And I know you've had something hit home in your neighborhood, right on your block.
Yeah, we had a shooting in my neighborhood just a couple days ago, and the bullet went into my neighbor's window and landed on their bedroom bed. They have a 1-year-old son. This isn't something that we should be dealing with. You don't need a gun to go to Best Buy. You know, it's just the prevalence of the amount of weapons that are on our streets is ridiculous. And I don't care if they're legal or illegal. I think that we really need to make sure that people who fire a firearm in public are dealt with swiftly, and that the punishment is a deterrent. But I also believe that we need to make sure that we're giving people second chances. You know, fourth and fifth chances, maybe not, but at least, you know, a second chance, because people can get it right. My brother was facing a lot of time in jail, and now he, you know, mentors people on sobriety and staying sober. And so we need to give people the opportunities, but we also need to make sure that this stops. It's enough. We put in background checks, we put in red flag laws, but really it's just how do we get it, the proliferation of these firearms off our streets.
Yeah, and the mass shootings, they garner the attention,
Yeah.
the headlines, and you know, a lot of TV exposure, things like that. But Ron Latz, the senator in St. Louis Park, told me once, it's the ones and the twos. It's the daily shootings that add up to 100 a day in the U.S. that we really need to focus on, and that's where you had, luckily, nothing happened, but those are constant, and I think sometimes we're numb to that.
Yeah, and I think, too, you know, we got to give people purpose. And, you know, I think so many people, you know, feel like they're trapped in, you know, in whether it's their socioeconomic or, you know, just bad environments. And so, like, making sure that people have education, jobs, healthcare, that's going to help. This is a public health epidemic, a public health crisis, and we need to address it like it's, you know, COVID-19 pandemic.
What bill are you most proud of having your name behind in St. Paul?
Well, I think that's a big one because there's just lots of really, you know, I can name so many, but I think this past session getting the funding for Highway 65 was great. But the bill I think that that I always talk about and that hits me the hardest was when I still represented Coon Rapids. I was out door knocking. I was about 6 months pregnant. It was 90 degrees out. And this lovely couple let me walk in their doorstep to enjoy the air conditioning for a bit. And we sat and chatted for, you know, almost a half an hour. And then I went on my way. And after the election, they contacted me, and their grandson had had an incident at their child care facility and now had a traumatic brain injury. And so I sat down with them and tried to figure out what kind of legislation we could pass to make sure this never happened again, and I dropped the ball. I had my baby, you know, was in session, and it just fell through the cracks. And about a year later, I got a letter in the mail from Terry, the woman who approached me on this, and was just like, hey, you know, we're still doing this, we're still here, still fighting this. And I felt like the biggest jerk in the world. And so I found her husband's cell phone number, called him up, and had a meeting and figured, you know, it was just something that they wanted to be told that the person who had done this to their grandson, was appealing to get their license back. They were never told that this person was actively trying to get their license back, and so were never able to share their story with the court on what happened. So we just put in some language that said, hey, DHS has to notify the party who was maltreated when they're trying to get their license back. And we got that in one of the health bills, and I stood up on the floor and gave a shout out to Terry and her grandson and their entire family. And this year I had a barbecue at my house at the beginning of summer, and Terry and her grandson showed up, and he's starting first grade, and you know, just that little, like 2 lines of language, I think, that had such an impact on that one family. That is my favorite piece of legislation I've done.
What do you think's going well in the state of Minnesota right now?
Oh man, you know, we have just, I just came from a event at the airport at about the launch of our sustainable aviation fuel hub. There's just so much excitement around the opportunities that we have. In Fridley, we're the only North American production site of electrolyzers, which is what creates hydrogen fuel. You know, in Minnesota, we produce corn and soy, and now camelina as a cover crop that can become jet fuel. You know, we're just at this exciting point where we can invest so much and be a model for the future. And I always joke that we're kind of on this Y in the road, and to the left is like The Walking Dead or The Last of Us, and then to the right is like the Jetsons or Star Trek. And I really want to get to the Jetsons and Star Trek. And so just, you know, that's my drive and focus, is figuring out how we can use our people and our land and our passions to guide the future of the state, and make it more, you know, a green economy, and that we're cleaning our water while we're making gasoline. So it's a really cool time.
Do you think there's anything Minnesota needs to be better at from a state perspective? I
mean, we can always be better, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things we can do better. We can make sure that one of the big things that I've been on this past 2 years, this past session, I was chair of a committee called Sustainable Infrastructure. And it was just like a point-in-time committee where we were kind of coming in at this perfect moment. And so my goal is to make sure that when we're doing infrastructure projects, that we are coordinating with all of the different asset owners. So let's say we're, you know, ripping up a road, and there's a project to do the storm sewers in 2 years. So we're going to redo this road and then come back and rip it up in 2 years to replace the storm sewers. To me, that seems a little crazy. And so how do we start to make sure that those projects are layered on each other, so that when we're doing the work, we're doing it all at once? And then not only that, but we're thinking about future needs as well. So like if the area doesn't have broadband, we can lay conduit for that. Or, you know, just making sure that we even just know where all of these things are can save so much time and money for the taxpayers. They've implemented this in Michigan, and the Michigan Infrastructure Council has said that they have reduced their infrastructure project costs by 40%.
Wow.
And so if we can reduce our costs by that much, but then upscale our projects so that they last longer, it's better material, and that it's more adaptable to our changing environment, then we'll be able to not have to invest in that in the near future again.
Besides that, do you have other budget priorities?
You know, I'd really like to get some sort of clean transportation standard, not necessarily making it a marketplace in Minnesota, but really getting the production and the distribution and here in Minnesota, because there's so many tax credits along the line when it comes to renewable fuels, that we can be the hub for not just aviation fuel, but for hydrogen, for renewable fuels, all of that stuff. And so we need to take advantage of it.
Anything specific that you want to accomplish if you're reelected to the Minnesota House?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we get my main goal for this session is number one, if we maintain the majority, that we really I want to maintain the majority for the Minnesota House. My goal is to be really active in transportation policy this year and really focus on, making sure our roads are safe and designed well, and then cutting that transit time commute. So those are two of my main goals for this next session. So lofty, but I think I can do it.
Here's your chance now. Convince the viewers that they should vote for you. Put you back in St. Paul.
Yeah, well, I think, it's you guys that decide this. And I hope that I've been a good voice for my constituents the past 8 years that I've been doing this. And, my cell phone is readily available to anybody who wants to email me. And I just, I want to make sure that I'm reflective of my community. Mm-hmm. And so, I just really want to hear feedback from everyone and really take their goals and needs to St. Paul. This job isn't about me, it's about everybody in my community. And so that's what I really hope to do. And it's a really cool job, so I hope you can send me back. Visit my website at erin4mn.com. You can always just Google me, Erin Koegel. Funny last name, but you'll find me out there. And so I love getting feedback, setting up meetings, talking with anybody who wants to, who has concerns or feedback for the community.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep. Erin Koegel, DFL, running for the Minnesota House District 39A. That's Spring Lake Park, Fridley, Columbia Heights, and Hilltop. This is Local Decision 2024.